Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar on easy roster budgeting with Wageloch. My name is Kiralee and I'm the Relationship Manager, and we have our training specialist Sienna here to take you through some simple tools to help you gain control of your wage budgets and help maximise profits. This webinar will go for 35 minutes, and if we could please ask that you all pop any questions into the chat box, we'll have the opportunity to answer them at the end during a 10-minute Q&A session. This session is being recorded and we will eventually upload it to YouTube to look back on. I'll now pass you over to Sienna to begin the session. Thanks, Sienna.
Excellent. Welcome everybody to today's webinar on budgeting, wages versus sales, POS system integrations, and also running some reports as well. So we are going to be covering a little bit today, not too much. And hopefully we can actually give you a lot more visibility into what you're doing in your business. So just while we're here and talking about it, if you do have any questions that fall outside of what we covered today, please contact help desk. So if you're logged into Wageloch, you can find that through the question mark, top right-hand corner. Give us a call, send us an email. Also, just make sure that you do put your questions in chat rather than sending it to us directly, as we may not see it during the session. So the first thing that we are going to discuss and cover today is going to be about budgets. Now, this has been heavily requested by a lot of people, both by myself in training sessions. How do we use our budgets? How do we see that information? And also we've had just a lot of questions in general over time about how to actually use your budgeting. So what we're going to be covering today is how to get to it, how to access it, when it applies, and also one of the new features within the web-based version of Wageloch, where you can actually see everything all in one hit. Makes it a lot easier to manage. So the first thing I will show you today is where to actually find this budgeting information. Now, generally speaking, if we're looking at forecasting, we're mostly going to be focusing on what's actually within your rosters. This is less to do with timesheets, more to do with rosters. So I'm going to share my screen first. Make sure you all can see everything I'm doing. Okay, beautiful. There we go. So you should be able to see we're at our roster home screen at the current moment. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into our current roster. So let's say, we're doing this in advance, so a couple of weeks in advance or a month in advance. We obviously double check that our costings are correct. We want to make sure we have the right amount of wages. Are we spending too much? Are we not spending enough? So we're going to find this in a few different ways. So one is, if you're quite familiar with the list view of Wageloch, when you load up straight away, you can see just for this particular day, on the 22nd, we've got all of our staff that we've rostered on. And we can see we've got our daily cost per person running down the right-hand side. We can also see on the top here, the total estimated cost for our Monday. So this is all of the days and people on this particular day. That's our total wages for the day. And how many rostered hours do we have as well? So if you're trying to focus on hours and costs, right, have I maybe gone over an allocation of hours, or have I gone over my threshold? We're going to be focusing on that today as well. So how to keep values under a certain amount. So that is a day-by-day view. Now, the other option that we have is you can also go into the roster drop-down, top right-hand corner, and we have a budget option just here. Now, this one's a little bit different. You're going to get per person, per day, per week, total for the fortnight. So if you are on a fortnightly basis, you'll see week 1, week 2, and then total for the fortnight. In this case, we're just looking at a weekly cycle here, so you can see per person, per day, and total for the week. You've also got your daily totals down the bottom, and you can also just get a really quick snapshot up the top of total projected wages for the week, and also your total cost per hour. Okay. Now, if you wanted to look at this in a slightly different method, so maybe you're like, oh, I don't want to look at the dollar costings per day and per week, per fortnight. Maybe you want to have a look at this in comparison to the actual timesheet. If we select this timesheet option just here, it's actually going to show us how many ordinary hours, are there any penalty rates, are there any overtime, and the total estimated wages as well. So we can see up the top here, rostered hours, we've got 611.25 for rostered hours for the week, and our wages in total is going to cost 18,758.87. Then we've got our individual breakdowns as per the timesheet, and you can see our ordinary wages are going to cost us 16,231.75, and we've got it just under, or just over, I should say, $2,500 of overtime. So this is just a little toggle switch up the top here that lets you know. You do also have a department filter just here as well. So if you're looking at going, okay, I just want to have a look at one specific team and my costings for that team, you can use this department filter as well. Select the department, and it will give you just the costings for that particular department. And same with the timesheet as well. So if you're using that filter, it just allows you to go, right, yes, okay, I'm spending this much in total, but how much am I spending per department? So it gives you both options there. Okay. Now, one other one that we can show you is the grid view. So this is the new feature I was mentioning just before that's only available in the web-based version. If you're still using the desktop version, all other options I've just mentioned are still there. You just will not have grid view available. So we have a little grid view toggle just up the top right here next to the list view. And why this is so useful is if I select all teams, all departments, it will give me same information we're looking on the budgeting screen, but this one's a little bit different. So we have our weekly total up the top here. We have our daily totals here, and you also get how many people are scheduled to work as well. So it kind of gives you how many people, how many hours, estimated wages. And you also on the left-hand side here is that if staff have a dollar figure allocated to their name, you'll see how many rostered hours you've given them and also their estimated costs for the week. So it is very similar to that budget section we were in before up the top here. Difference is that you're getting a slightly varied view of it, a little bit more simplified. Best option about here as well as leading into rostering is you can actually still edit shifts from this view. You can still move shifts around in this view as well. It just gives you a little bit more visibility. Okay. Now, if you are running a fortnightly option, you will actually have a drop down up in the top right here next to your grid view toggle that'll have full roster, roster week 1, roster week 2. So you can actually break it up and look at week 1, week 2 if you wanted. Okay. So that is where to find the budgeting information. So we've got just roster day by day. That is one option. You've got your drop down up the top, or you have your grid view toggle. So list view, day by day, grid view, your entire week or fortnight for all staff, all teams. You've also got your budget area as well. And you can use a department filter up here as well. So you've kind of got everything all in one. Okay. So that's where we get that information. You can also get this through reports as well. There are some budgeting reports which we're going to cover later on. So while this relies on what's in the roster, you can then go back into the roster view and then make changes and edits if costings are incorrect. Your reports might be for later down the track and you're like, okay, I want to run a roster versus timesheet audit. What was my estimated costings versus my actual wages for the time period? So that's a little bit different. That's where we generate those reports. Okay, so talking about some tools linked in with all of this. Now, we do have the option to put a maximum wage budget in per roster. So I could say, all right, for this particular week, maybe I need my budget to be under $15,000. If that exceeds it by 1 cent, the system will give me a warning saying, hey, you've actually exceeded your budget by 1 cent. So we've got that tool available. Now, where we find this is in the settings cog and up the top right here. All right, there is an option in here for roster. Now, most of what is in this roster settings area is more about customizing your printouts and some extra tools and functionality. The specific tool we're going to be using today is in the budgets category. Okay. You do have 4/5 options in here. Now, taking into account everything in Wageloch, as we were just looking at, that is gross wages. So before tax, before super, before any deductions. Okay. Now, if we wanted to go, okay, maybe on top of my wages in the roster, I would like to see an extra 25% for my overheads. We have that option. You can simply just tick on, add a percentage of loading, 25%. And what that will do is when we then go back in and look at the rosters for our budgets, we would see our base wages plus an additional 25% on top. We have had some people get caught out on this, is that they set it up once and then, months down the track, they completely forget it's there and going, hang on a second, why is this person's hourly wage wrong? It's doing the hourly wage plus the additional 25%. So just be mindful if you do set this up, it will throw out your costings for the hourly wages as well, which is expected. You could also go, okay, maybe I don't want to take into account my overheads, but I would like to get a realistic figure of what my wages are going to cost. I want to add 10% to take into account their superannuation. You can do that too. So that'll just add on 10%. Still will inflate their base wages by that 10%. Again, as long as you don't forget that you've added this, and you'll be perfectly fine. So that is one option. You can also spread extra money evenly across the week. So what this will do is if I were to tick that box and add in $100, it would average that $100 out over the entire week or the fortnight. So that could be taking into account any additional wages that you think could happen, any additional expenses that could happen as well. Same as if there's like a standard expense that you have every single week or fortnight, you could use that tool if you wanted. Excluding salaried staff from your budget unless rostered on. Now, this one's a little bit of a fun one to explain. Now, we're going to go on a fortnightly cycle. So let's say we have Jim Bob. Jim Bob usually works 76 hours, or he's salaried for 76 hours in the fortnight. If we do not add Jim Bob in to the roster, it'll just take his fortnightly wage and hours and average it over the 14-day period. So we'd see a value appear on every single day, regardless of whether he's been rostered or not. Now, I could tick this box, and the only way that his wages would be taken into consideration is if we actually add him into the roster with shifts. What it would do at that point is, depending on how many shifts we add in for Jim Bob, is that it would average it out over the shifts that we give. So let's say we give him 8 shifts over the fortnight. It would go, right, 76 hours divided by 8 equals blah, and it would average that out over the fortnight. So it's just something to keep in consideration if you do have salaried employees in the system. If you don't add them into the roster, it'll average them over 14 days or 7 days if you're on weekly. If you enable this option, roster them on, and then their hours will be taken into consideration and their costings will be as well. Up to you whether you want to use that or not. The last one that we're going to be looking at here is allow setting a maximum wage budget. So this is the one I was saying that we can go, right, we need to keep this particular roster or any roster under a certain value, which might change or flex each week or fortnight. Tick this option on. You can also choose to set it by department as well. So this is really useful for things like retail and hospitality. Maybe I want to go, okay, I need my back of house wages to stay under a certain value, and my front of house to stay under a value, and my bar to stay under a certain value. So can be really useful for any industry. I tend to get a lot of clients that ask about this specifically for hospitality more than anything else. I will enable this afterwards. I'm going to show you the first option to set a maximum wage budget for the week or the fortnight. Then we'll come back in here and I'll show you how the budget by department works. So we click done to save that. We've saved those settings. We are now going to go back into our roster. Okay, and we are going to go into our roster drop down up the top right and to our budget section. Now, down the bottom left here, this wasn't here before when we were looking at it, but I can now set a maximum budget for this particular roster. Keep in mind that if you copy this roster into another future dated roster, or you're copying from a template, this information generally will not pull through because you still may need to make tweaks and changes to your roster. So it's always really good to come in, double check it, and make sure there's a value there if you're using it. So what will happen, let's say I need to keep this under 18,750. So based on our total costings up the top here, you can see it's just highlighted in red to say, nope, you've exceeded your budget. Now, if I hit save on here, it lets me know that I've exceeded my budget by $8.88. Now, this is a really good tool if you are going, okay, maybe you're more hands off and you have someone doing your rostering for you and you go, okay, I just want to actually make sure that they're doing the right thing. So if you were to go into a roster, the maximum wage budget is set as value, and then you get that alert, you'd be like, right, why are they rostering so much? Like, why is this costing so much? Especially if you've exceeded your budget by hundreds or possibly thousands, you'd be like, okay, do we have people that have started with us that I'm not aware about? Do we have overtime creeping up? Do we have more work coming on? What is happening? So it's just a really good tool to give that little bit of an extra visibility to how much you're actually spending on your wages. If you're doing the rostering or you're not doing the rostering, this alert will show up regardless. So whoever's doing it, if it's been turned on and a budget has been set, the alert will appear. I can still progress anyway and say, yes, I want to save it. But if we were to go back and run reports later on, we can then look at that and go, right, why did this cost us more? Okay. Now, it could also be that while this could cost us more now, when we're doing our rosters, it could be in the timesheets that maybe we have a string of casuals, not here because they're all full-timers, but it could be that when we get into the timesheet, we have a bunch of shifts that get cancelled or casuals that call in sick, so they get removed from the timesheet because they're not getting paid. So you could actually find that your actual costs are lower than was originally forecast. So it is an option and it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. Now, the other option we had as well is to do this by department. So we've got a series of departments here. This one is just a total wage estimate for the entire week or fortnight. So if we go back into settings up the top, go down to roster, I'm going to go back into our budgetings category. Okay. Now I'm going to set it by department and click done. So what will happen is that now that we've done this by department, that original one of 18,750, that's going to go disappear. All right. So now if we go back into our roster drop down up the top, go down to budget, we'll now actually see multiple boxes here. Okay. So I could say, sit down, your maximum wage for this week, it needs to be under 3,200. Yatla, you need to be under 5K. Raceview, you're going to be under 2,300. So you can put whatever values in here you want. You can see Raceview is immediately flagged for us saying, nope, they've gone over. Narang bar is the same. Landscaping yard is fine. Okay, same thing. So if we go, yep, that's all, we've got two that are flagging as too high. That is when we could do one of a few things. Here's our department filter. Go to Raceview. Go right, what's going on here? Why do we have so much happening? Do we have extra work happening today? I could show it by the timesheet. We've got nearly 20 hours of overtime happening. So that would be a great example to be like, right, that's, well over. We can also see the estimated wages are quite high, so they might get paid a higher hourly wage, or some people just work more than others. So that's where we can go, oh, whoopsies, too low. I can go 6,800. Still flagged for me because it's still way over. All right. So that's how by department would work if you needed it. And then even then I can flick back and see my flags where they're coming up. Okay. Now we do currently also have, instead of working by the value of wages, so the dollar value, we do currently also have an option to set an hourly cap by department. So going, okay, rather than saying my wages need to be under this amount of dollars, it'll be, I have X amount of hours to allocate for this department. If you go over that, it will give you a warning. Now we have identified that we need to look at that a little bit further. So it is an option. I will show you where it is. Just know that we need to take a little bit of a deeper look at that on our end. But if we click on the settings cog up the top here, go into the departments area. I'm going to leave our roster for the moment. Okay, and we have this particular option in the departments area. So enable alert when max hours were reached per department. When that's enabled, it gives us an extra column that says max hours. When we click on edit, we go, right, what is the total amount of hours I need to stay under? Or what do I have available to allocate? I enter that into the max hours, click done, and I do that for each of my teams. If you don't need one, you can leave it as 0. So like landscaping yard, maybe it's like the head office. I could set that to 0 because it doesn't matter. But if you go, no, we've got specific jobs and we need to stay under a certain amount of hours, then you can use this tool. What this does is when you're actually in the roster, is that if you exceed the hours that you've allocated for that particular roster, it will give you an alert saying you've exceeded this by 18 hours, 26 hours, 32 hours. And then you can go, oh, whoops, maybe that person's meant to be in a different department for that day. Or maybe we do have extra work that day. So this could be just like a generic thing. So every fortnight, we need to stay under a certain amount of hours allocated. Whereas with the dollar figures, is that it would just be, you can change that per roster as you need to, depending on what is actually happening for that period. Okay. So that is all for the budgeting side of things at this stage. So we're going to cover reports later on. But again, just to cover, this is going to be in the rosters area, in your actual roster. And you have your grid view, which is just the toggle switch up the top here. You have your list view, which will give you per day and per person. And then you also have your budget drop down as well. All right. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat box. Just be sure not to direct message myself or Kiralee, because we may not see those alerts pop up. So if you do have any questions about budgets, pop them in the chat. We will have a little Q&A after the fact. And I'm going to have a sip of water. And then we're going to talk about wages versus sales, which is also really, really important. Okay. So wages versus sales. We have some people, so a lot of our clients that use this and a lot of clients that don't. And again, this will depend on the industry that you work in. We get this a lot more for retail and hospitality, less so for things like manufacturing, but you can still use this if you feel that you might want to. So you've got a couple of options here. This is also found within the rostering tool, but you can also, again, generate this in reports. There is a small section of it that is found in the timesheets as well. So the first thing is, if we are going to use this, where do we enable it? So the first thing we do is in the settings cog at the top right again, we're going to go into the general area. In here, we have the option for track wage percentages. Now you do have the option to use sales or gross profit. Now, if you do happen to work in pharmacy, there are some POS systems that we do integrate with, which I'll be talking about after this area. And we can actually use gross profit, which will actually ignore your high cost drugs. So GP is very, very useful, but we can just use sales. You can also highlight when a certain percentage is more than a value. So if I go, okay, I want to be notified if my wage percentage is more than, I'm going to say 25%. You can also, like our budgeting, you can actually do this by department as well if you wanted. So that is an option too. That could be more if you have certain areas of sales that you wanted to take care of and nurture and check, that would be ideal. All right, but in this case, we're going to track our wage percentages using sales, and we're going to highlight this when it's more than 25%. We click done. Okay, so first things first, we're going to go back into our rosters again. Okay, and what we're going to do is with the sales, we go into the drop down at the top, same where we found our budget before, but we have an option here for sales. Now, you don't have to do all of this, but it is really helpful to give you accurate data. If you don't have this information, there is a tool that you can use to get around it. So what we have in here is we have projected sales, actual sales, sales variance, projected wages, actual wages, wages variance, and then it kind of flows on from there. So with our projected sales, if you have an estimate of how much you think you might make per day, great. If you don't, but you maybe have a rough estimate for the entire week or the fortnight, you do have an option to spread a total value evenly across that time period. Now, the only reason I don't tend to use this too much is that it will allocate things for weekends, which can throw values out if you're looking on a daily basis. Otherwise, with this spread evenly one, I usually just focus on the final column, to be fair. That's usually the one I would use if I'm just averaging my projections. But typically how this works is our projected sales, all right, we can enter in a value. Here's one I prepared earlier. So we enter in a value. Tuesday, enter in a value, how much we think we're going to make. Okay, maybe we're not open weekends in this case. So we can actually see here at the moment, my projected sales, 36.52. I haven't entered in any actual sales yet. Then we've got our sales variance because we're currently, we haven't entered in any actual data. Now, these actual sales, that information is entered in either two areas. One, you can enter your sales in here once the day has passed, so you can backdate it. Or if you're doing the timesheets, as you're actually finalizing the timesheets, there is an area down the bottom where you enter in your sales for the day. So I'll show you where that is shortly. But once we have an actual sales and a projected sales, you can see we're now up just under 5,100. So we estimated 36.52, we got 87.52. So we're up quite a bit. Our projected wages is based off what is in our roster. Our actual wages is what we've finalized and locked into the timesheet. And it lets us know, are we up, are we down? Okay. Projected wage percentage. So this is based on your projected sales and your projected wages. It was projected originally at 89.53%, which definitely not good. But when we actually came to getting sales and finalizing and everything in, we actually dropped down to 37.7%. So we dropped that down a lot. So I flagged it, say anything over 25% will highlight. So you can see that's where that orange is coming in. Okay. Now, same token, from there, we could add the rest of the sales in, or for the rest of the week. The actual wages won't come through until we finalize the timesheets. Okay. But we've also got here the wage variance. So we've got our projection, our actual wage variance, so 52%. Rostered hours is what we forecast in the roster. Actual hours for what we had in the timesheet. Again, are we up, are we down in hours? Projected sales versus labor hour is 33.98, and the actual was 81.41. Okay, so just gives you a really good insight on what your actual costings are. So what is your incoming sales or GP versus your outgoing wages? Mr. Beginning, not sure how to enable the budget drop down. Budgets are automatically there, Vicky. When you're in a roster, it's just in the drop down up the top right. Figured I'd just point that one out while there. So budget and sales, same area, different tools. Okay. So if we would enter in additional values for the rest of the week, we'll hopefully see some of those percentages will drop. Oh, that was a high one for that day. But we can see here. All right, so we've got our projections again. So this one, not so great. So this one's 133%. That's scary. Also scary. Okay, so it's good to just keep an eye on these. All right. Now, if we wanted to, so let's say, for example, I'm going to remove our projections. Maybe they're not quite accurate. All right. Maybe I want to go and use my spread evenly tool. Okay, so let's say, for example, all right, I think I'm going to project that we are going to make 120K. So 120, 1, 2, 3, and we click spread evenly. So when we use this tool, so the actual sales and everything else will still be somewhat relevant, just as a snapshot. What we're really going to be focusing on is this final column at the right here. All right, so if I click spread evenly, it populates our projections. And that's where we're now looking at this column here. So we think we're going to make 120K. We actually made 115. So we're down just under 4,200. Our projected wages was 18,758. Now we haven't finalized our timesheets yet. This is why this is so low, but it says that we're about 15K out. Lets us know our projected wage percentage was 15.863%. fantastic. But our actual wage percentage, because we haven't finalized our timesheets, is 2.83, which realistically, if you saw that, I would probably be either A, surprised, or B, concerned, both. So this is where this tool is used to spread evenly, focus on your final column, because your daily is not going to be that accurate for your projections. All right, but this will give you a really good insight into how much you're spending versus how much you're actually making. Okay. So where to enter in sales. So when you're doing your actual wages, where do we enter that in the timesheet if we're not going to enter it in here? Go into your timesheet up the top. I'm going to leave this. Right, go into our current timesheet. All right, and when we're looking at a specific day, you can see down the bottom here, you've got your sales or your GP box. So instead of entering your actual sales in back on your roster in that sales area, enter your sales in here. And when you finalize the day as well, it'll actually A, give you your actual sales, and B, it'll give you your actual wages. So 2 in 1. Okay. So projections in the rosters, actuals will come from your timesheets. If you don't have your actual sales for the day, you can go back into an old roster and you can backdate those if you need to. Okay, so that is pretty much all we're going to talk about for sales versus wages. We have 2 other sections to go through, which will be some of the point of sale systems we integrate with, and also reports. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat. Just make sure that you're not direct messaging myself or Kiralee, because we may not see them. I've gotten a couple so far, but it's okay. It's all right. So I'll give you a minute. If you have any questions you can think about, type them in. We've got about another 10, 15 minutes of chatting, and then we'll be doing some questions. Okay, so point of sale system integrations. Now, some may be aware, some may not be aware. There are some point of sale systems that we do integrate with, or at least we integrate with partners or systems that will help us bring your sales data through the system. So the reason that we like to try and suggest this where possible is that when we're looking at that roster area with your sales versus wages, or in the timesheets with that little box down the bottom with your sales or GP, is that some point of sale systems we can directly integrate with to pull that information through automatically from your system. So one of the more common ones we have, or a series of more common ones we use, we do have Minfos, we have POSWorks, we have ZPOS or Z Software, Blue Eyes, Lots, and Stribbon. So they're the main point of sale systems that we use quite a bit for our clients. And it's just as simple as we go through and you call us, we'll go through an integration with you, set it all up. It's usually hiding in your settings area and in the sales settings. So we'll have that all set up and turned on for you. We'll make sure it links up to your POS system, and basically from there, it'll automatically drag that information through into Wageloch. So it saves you having to run the reports from your POS system and then manually enter that data. So it does save time. Now, apart from the more common ones, we have recently completed an integration with Doshi. So that is a series of other point of sale systems for other industries that are outside pharmacy, such as H&L, which is great for your hospitality teams. Lightspeed or Counter, again, usually for hospitality. We also do SwiftPOS, and we do have a lot more. So if you are querying, do we integrate with your point of sale system, just shoot us an email through to helpdesk@wageloch.com.au, or give us a call, and we'll let you know if we integrate with your point of sale system. One system we are currently in development with is Task point of sale, or Task POS. So we are constantly building and developing new integrations and working with different teams. So yeah, if there is not one, like if you call us or email us and go, hey, what do you integrate with, and yours is not on the list, let us know, and we can usually try and get in touch with the development team and see if they're willing to integrate with us. All right, so the last thing we are going to talk about today is reports. So taking everything that we've learned today, so the budgeting, the sales versus wages, all of that sort of fun stuff, where can we just get that information? Where can we pull it from? Okay. So thankfully, everything in the reports area is pretty well categorized. Some of the report names are similar, but they do provide slightly different information and different options. So we're going to go into the reports area at the top of the screen. And the first thing we're actually going to look at is the roster budget report, which is R008. Now, when we were looking at the budgets before, when we clicked in the drop-down box, select budget, it gives us the per day, per person, per week, per fortnight, if you're fortnightly. That is essentially the same information, just in a report format. So it's not live data in your roster, it's like maybe after the fact. You want to see how much you had originally forecasted 6 months later. So we go into the report section, we go into the rostered hours category. And you can see we've got a few in here, but we're going to specifically look at roster budget report R008. Okay, we are going to get a very small series of options in here. So you can pick one of a couple options for our period. We can either pick a specific roster period that we're looking at here, or we can look at a specific date range. So you could go, okay, I want to have a look at the last 6 months, or I just want to have a look at one period in particular. So I'm going to look at the previous week. Display preferences. I can group things up by department if I wanted to. I tend to not do this, but it is up to you. It just basically will keep Sippy Downs and Raceview and Narangba all grouped up. You can look at specific departments if you want to. So rather than showing everybody, I could turn on my department filter, and I just want to have a look at my wages for landscaping yard just by using the select all. And I will just say that particular list of staff that are assigned to landscaping. But in this case, we just want to see everyone, so we're not going to use our filter. We go into the report. And that same information we were looking at the budgets area, it's just in an exportable format for an Excel spreadsheet. Pretty straightforward. So you can't edit the data through here. Okay, so you can still look, you can still print it, you can still use your department filter to go, oh, I don't need to see those particular people. Okay, if I wanted to do the group by department, this will separate it out, very similar to that filtering option we had in the budget before. So we add that in, go back into the report, and you can see we now have it grouped up. Landscaping yard, Narangba, Raceview, Sippy Downs, it's all there. Okay. Beautiful. So all done there. So we can just hit export and give it a moment. It's going to generate that. And we can now download our CSV, and that'll pop up in Excel, ready for you to run formulas on, maybe do some extra reporting, or just to have a look at some anomalies. So it's all there for you. With the select period here, again, you can, just to reiterate, you can select a full date range, so I can have a look for the last 6 months and any future rosters if I've got any in the system, and I can run that report for that duration of time. So rather than selecting this option down the bottom here, we just select a duration of time up the top. Okay. So that's the roster budget report. The other one I've got noted here is a roster budget by timesheet. Now, if you recall right at the start when we were talking about the budgeting, we had the option to do just the costings day by day, person by person, and then totals. So day by day, person, total. We also had the option to switch it according to the timesheet, which will show us our ordinary hours, our penalty rates, our overtime, any leave that's in there. That one is the roster budget by timesheet column. So this more gives you just a really quick summary of what you're estimating to pay. So same thing, we can pick a date range, or we can pick a pay cycle. So I'm just going to use a pay cycle. Display preferences, no real changes in here. I can filter specific staff. So if I go, okay, they were originally rostered to work X amount of hours, I want to double check that. I can use my filter, and I can pick in employees to look at specifically. In the timesheet display preferences, you can actually use timesheet data if you really want to. You can also group them up by department as well. So same as we were looking at before, which I'm going to do. And if we generate that report, it's going to give us the actual timesheet columns that they've been allocated to. All right. So again, you can see we've got the landscaping yard department all listed. You can see the hourly rate that they received, what they got paid in total. And you can also see, right, we've had someone with annual leave, and you can see their ordinary hours. You can also see their overtime. Okay. If you wanted to see dollar figures in here as well, so estimated dollar figures, you could go back to your timesheet display preferences and add in include paid values. Okay. When we generate that report, it would give you your estimated costings for that particular period. Okay. All right, and we have two other ones in here. So I'm going to touch on the sales report. So if you recall, when we're looking in the roster at sales versus wages area, that's where we could input our projections, input our actual sales, that sort of thing. We want to actually pull that report now for however long we've been entering in that data. We go into our sales versus wages category in our reports area, and we're going to run the sales report R002. Now, very few options in here again. So again, we can pick a full date range, or we can pick a particular period we want to look at. Display preferences, you can actually pick to do it daily, weekly, monthly, whatever you prefer. I usually go daily. And we just go straight into the report, and that'll give us our daily projections. It'll give us our actual. It'll give you the same information we were looking at before. Okay. Now you can see nothing's been finalized here. There's been no projections or actual put in. So it's just flagging it all as just not right because it's just wrong. So that's why it's really crucial to put the right information in here. Otherwise your reports will be thrown out. Okay. So that was the sales report, R002. The last one I just want to throw in here, just because this is a really common one I like to bring up during my training sessions, is the roster versus clock versus paid. Now, it doesn't specifically tie in with budgeting or wages versus sales, but it can help to find those variances in, right, why was my roster more expensive than my timesheet? Or why was my roster cheaper than my timesheet? What actually happened? Now, it falls within rostered hours, clock times, and timesheet hours, so it can be run through any three. If we work through the rostered hours section, so you have roster versus paid times. So this one, again, equally as useful. What were they scheduled for? What did they pay them for in the timesheet? Another one is roster times versus clock times. So really, really useful if you're just checking their attendance records. You've also got clock times versus paid times as well. Now, if I run either of these, so I'm going to run the roster versus paid times for you. So what were they scheduled for? What did they actually work? We'll just run it for previous pay period that's recorded here. Display preferences. Now, this is where you can make some different selections. So I can see rostered versus paid, clock versus paid, or roster versus clock. I like to compare all three because that'll show me roster, clock hours, and the timesheet. I'm also going to choose to include my leave because I just want to see if there's any anomalies when people have actually been in sick leave or annual leave. If you want to see everything, your variance here should always be set to 0. Everything else is fine. You can focus on particular staff if you want to. But in this case, I'm going to go straight to the report. And what this will show me is what I've scheduled them for in the roster, et cetera, et cetera. So it all follows on. This is really useful to check, right, did they actually get scheduled in? Did they clock in and clock out? And did I pay them? So great example here. We have Florinda, was rostered 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., didn't clock out, in and out, and didn't get paid. So we have a 9-hour variance there. We then have Albina here, was not rostered to work, clocked in and clocked out, got paid. So we can see that we have very large variance of hours here and a small amount here, and then we've got an extra 10 hours of confirmed. So this is really useful if you're checking attendance, you're making sure they're getting paid properly. You know, is this person getting called in frequently? Do we just need to change them to a different employment type? So this can be very, very useful. And again, you can export it as a spreadsheet if you would like. But that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about reports today. So the main ones in there were the roster budget report under the roster category, which is R008. So this one just here. Roster budget by timesheet columns. You also have under the sales and wages, your sales report, R002. But that is pretty much everything from me. So what we're going to do, I'm going to hand it back to Kiralee. Kiralee is going to, I guess, go through and answer any questions that we may have received. I know I got a couple in my direct messages, which I'll go through anyway. But yeah, Kiralee, if you've got anything that you may have received.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Sienna. That was a really informative session and certainly going to help everyone to keep on top of those wage budgets. So thank you for that. I have not had anything come through direct to myself. So perhaps you just want to move ahead with the ones that you've got directly come over your end. That'd be great.
Excellent. So thankfully, I already answered that one in the last section. So I received one from Tammy basically asking if we can export the information in a spreadsheet. We covered that literally just then through the report. So yes, you absolutely can. And I briefly addressed Vicky with making sure where do we get into the budgets within the rosters, same way you get into the sales. So just to recap on both of those, in our rosters up the top, go into your actual roster. And in the top right-hand corner in the roster drop-down, this is where you get into your budgets. And then you've also got your sales versus wages information there as well. Okay, so they're both pretty much in the same spot, thankfully, so it makes it really easy to find. Cool. All right. Casey asked, is there an extra cost for integrated POS systems? Look, I can't rightly say yay or nay based off that. If it's something that we already integrate with, generally through us, no. Things like with Doshi, because it is a third party, we'll usually put you in touch with them and basically go through and get the integration sorted. So it really does depend on your point of sale system. But for the general thing, no, but it's a case by case basis. So we'll usually advise at the time that you ask us. Vicky also asked, can you report on more than one pay period? Yes, as we saw, you can actually select a date range. So you could select 6 months in arrears or 6 months in advance, or you can pick a particular roster period that you've got. Patsy has just asked, is there a report you can run that identifies where budgeted hours have been exceeded? Yes, but with the budget hours, leave that one with me because I've got to get some investigation done on that. So I will come back to you on that one, Patsy. But yeah, that is pretty much all I've got. If anyone has any other questions, ask now. If not, you're always welcome to tap on our little question mark up the top here. You've got our email button. You've also got our contact numbers. One thing some of you may not be aware of is we actually have some online user guides now. So we have this button in here as well that will redirect you into our online guides here. And if we scroll down, you have your sales versus wages area. You've also got point of sale integrations and some information on reports. In relation to the rostering budget side of things, I still actually need to write an article for that, but it will eventually show up under the rostering area in advanced rostering. And you've got other information there as well. Okay, so definitely use our online guides. They are there to help you, but if you do go through them and you decide, I can't work that out, makes no sense, again, give us a call, shoot us an email, and we'll definitely help you out. It's what we're here for.
Yeah, the team's more than happy to provide extra guidance on those features. Anything that Sienna's covered today or that you want to know more about, feel free to get in touch and we'll take you through it over the phone if that's the easiest way for you. So that's everything. Look, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you very much, Sienna. That was really informative and I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it. Enjoy the rest of your day and we will see you all next time. See you guys.
Bye.